Welcome to People Are Everything, the show that's a bit like Desert Island Discs, but rather than bring music, I ask my guests to bring the 5 people that have shaped the person they are. And today I'm talking with Jess Gregson. I was introduced to Jess by Jindy Man, who was one of my earlier podcasts in season 1. And just one of those people you meet and you just hit it off straight away. And I know you're going to love this conversation. She's very articulate, very interesting. And we share a lot of the same references and points of view. And we're both Geminis, which we didn't discover until we actually started talking. So sit back and relax and enjoy Jess Gregson. Hello, Jess. Welcome to People Are Everything. It's lovely to see you.
Hello, Julia. How are you?
I'm great. This is good, isn't it? I love your backdrop. Is that real? That's not one of those kind of things you get off the little panel at the side where you want to hide your background, is it? That is actually a real thing.
No, it is my lounge.
Every
single one of the rooms in our house is quite vivid colours. I like colour, so.
Oh, definitely. I love it. I feel very, energized by it. And I'm now thinking mine is a bit of a spruce. But listen, it's so good to see you. I'm very, very excited by this conversation. The link to you and me is my very, very clever way of gathering new, exciting people in my life is to ask people at the end of this process, who should I speak to next and why? And the person that led me to you is Jindy. And have to be so careful because I seem to say Jindy's name a lot. And people keep picking me up on it and saying, are you obsessed with this Jindy fellow? And I said, I think I might be, I think I've just really connected with him. I really like him a lot. So I'm glad that we're mutual friends of his.
Me too.
And I am very self-conscious all of a sudden that I'm mentioning him again. But that's how we met, isn't it? And how do you know Jindy? How did you come to know him in the first place?
So Jindy is, I think you will particularly like this with your love of people connecting. If you remember, do you know what? I don't even know if it's still going. There's a platform called Lunch Club, which understandably had quite a lot of success in COVID because people were kind of, I guess, looking for ways to connect. And it had an algorithm that would randomly match you to kind of other people that you could just have a video lunch meeting with, having never met them before and knowing only a little bit about them. And Jindy and I were matched on Lunch Club for a conversation. And we have known each other ever since. And he started the conversation. The conversation started well because he held up an LFC Liverpool Football Club mug. So our opening gambit was, another Liverpool fan. Okay, this is going to be fun.
Yeah. Oh, I want to be in the Lunch Club. That sounds fabulous.
Yeah. I don't know whether it's still going. I met some very interesting people, but Jindy is one of the people I've stayed in touch with. And then when I started Extra Brain, which I'm sure I won't try not to talk about too much, but I'm almost certain will come up in passing, which is the organisation that I run. Jindy took great faith because I said, I've got this idea and it's going to be a thing a bit like this. And I'm not really 100% sure how it's going to work yet, but I think it's going to be great. And I sort of described it to him and said, do you want to be part of it? And he went, yeah, absolutely. And I love that. He just took a leap of faith after we'd met a few times. And I think we kind of knew we had sort of shared values and he kind of could get his head around what I was trying to do. And he went, yeah, cool. Where do I sign? Great.
Brilliant.
We've been friends and colleagues since.
Well, listen, let's spend some time on that then, because I do want you to share who you are and what you're all about. And I know a bit about Extra Brain because I'm sort of curious about that too. And we've had some conversations. So why don't we start there? Just talk a bit about you and your possibly some of your career history, whatever you want to say, whatever comes to mind.
Oh, yeah. I mean, my career history. I suppose the interesting bits are that I kind of started my career, and it got quite serious quite quickly and quite early. So by the time I left university, I was in quite a serious job. And that put me in a good position to take a job in London that was probably a little bit, I don't know, I suspect would have been the sort of job that other people might have come to kind of a few years after university. I had a bit of a head start, which is obviously partly my own effort, but as with everything, it's, a bit of luck, a bit of effort, right place, right time, happened to be the right skills. So I ended up spending for my sins, the best part of 20 years, working in and then latterly running creative businesses and service businesses and agencies and things like that. And it's an interesting part. I mean, there's a zillion interesting parts of that, and some of those things will come up in conversation. But I suppose one of the things I learned during that time is I quite liked working in those businesses, but actually the sort of creative and marketing part, oddly, was the thing I liked the least. It was actually the running of organisations and kind of the organisational design, everything from the dynamics and the kind of strategy. That was the bit that I ended up working out. I loved, and so then and later then. I was given the opportunity to, somebody I'd known for a long time actually said to me, would you like half of my consultancy and to come and do this with me? And I thought, you know what, I probably would, because then I can spend all of my time thinking about the workings of other businesses. And so I did that and loved it. And someone asked me to be a non-exec in that period. And I started really, really enjoying that part. And that's kind of what I do now, is effectively I'm an advisor, non-exec. I work a little bit on ops, but mainly on strategy. And an Extra Brain is really a cooperative of other people who do that fundamentally, but for all different types of business. And they're not all advisors or NEDs. Jindy is a coach, as you will know. He's also a brilliant consultant and has got a very sharp business mind as well. And we run a kind of a loose pirate ship of brilliant people who can collaborate on projects or can operate on their own. And I guess there's two sides. Is one, for our clients, without sounding too kind of worky, for our clients, it's about the ability to tap into different skills, personalities, expertise when they need, because everyone kind of knows each other's skills and we can pass work very smoothly between us. But for us as individuals, and it comes back to really the kind of segues us a bit more into this podcast, when you're working independently, it can be a bit lonely, actually. And the idea of having a team, especially when a lot of people have come from a kind of team organisation background, you miss that. Sometimes it's the fun stuff, but often it's also the collaboration, the problem solving, just the support. So I guess we do a bit of both. We give people a team without kind of losing their independence, and then we also act as teams. So that's Extra Brain, really, in a nutshell.
I love the idea of a loose pirate ship. I think that's a really interesting sort of visual image. And obviously getting to know each other in preparation for today, I've gotten involved with some of your kind of, I don't know, social events, I suppose you'd call them.
Yeah.
The gatherings. We shouted at each other loudly over
And
that was so loud.
Oh, that was so loud. That was the wrong venue. But
it was great. It was a great venue. It was just very popular.
Yes.
So I think that's it's one of those places that like everybody obviously loves. But and I obviously I didn't spend time with everybody there, but the people there were very eclectic, very interesting, and you can see that there's a genuine desire to take all their wisdom and experience and pay it forward. And I'm a big fan of that. I think you get to a certain stage of your career where that motivates you more than anything. Like that knowledge that one day these little brains of ours will switch off forever. And, you get to a certain point of life and you think, right, I just want to give this over to someone else and make somebody else, hopefully get some benefit from it. So I can see that beyond the practical application of it, there's a desire there to kind of harness really intelligent people, really capable people, and kind of make a difference somewhere out there. So I love the sound of it. An Extra Brain as a name. Well done. I like that. That's a good name.
We do love our name. I mean, I mean, it's exactly that, we work predominantly, almost solely, but definitely predominantly with founders of small independent businesses. They're a bit into their career. They're kind of, they know what they don't know. And actually they're really looking for that connection, to your point of kind of, it's not just about somebody practical to help them. It's actually about somebody they want to spend time with and somebody they can really build trust with. And that's the heart of this, really, is people and their connection. And
absolutely.
Kind of, which is why when Jindy told me about it, I was like, that sounds brilliant. And it was nice that we met, because it's evident we've got some shared values and ways of thinking, which is a really nice start.
Oh, good. All right. Well, I'm very intrigued by this next question then, because I like to ask people how they found the process. And I I do this because I think it's very revealing, of how people think and are, because everyone's so different in this process. Everyone does it differently. Everyone puts time aside differently, and experiences it differently. So I'm very intrigued to know how you did.
Well, yesterday morning, I am very lucky that I live by the sea. I drove my camper van down to the sea, hitched up my internet router, and sat and made myself some notes by the sea, which is kind of the function of how I did it. But I suppose, I started thinking about it almost as soon as, actually much more after we'd had the conversation, but as soon as Jindy mentioned it, and I realised it was my fate to do this podcast, I thought, right, I better put some thought into this. And probably wrestled a little bit with ways to do it, because I think you kind of, maybe everyone doesn't, but you immediately feel this kind of sense of guilt of, well, I'm going to miss people out who've been brilliantly influential no matter what happens. And then I kind of had a desire also maybe to try and push myself to think about it a bit differently. I suspect everyone could talk and will have brilliant, amazing, valuable stories about their family, whether it be their partner, their children, their parents, their family. And I kind of I've got quite a big family, and I thought, well, I'm going to miss people out if I do that. Somebody's not going to like it. Actually, they're not really like that at all. But my immediate thought was, oh my God, who will I miss out? And I thought, actually, and it was something you said to me when we spoke about kind of almost a kind of passing moments that really made me think. I actually wanted to kind of almost not talk about any of those people who, I guess, kind of understand their influence on you a bit more. And I wanted to pick out 5 people who had no intention of being influential.
Yeah, just did it
but end
anyway.
up kind of being impactful and changing your life. And some of those people are people I don't know, but I've got a connection with. And some of those people are people I've met. And one of them is a bit of a cheat in that it's a person I'm using to represent lots of people.
Oh, don't mind a bit of cheating. I love that, because you're right. The people who know that they've had an impact on you, they do occupy a special place, and I'm sure you'll make time to talk to them at the right time, and maybe you already have, to let them know. But they will be aware of it anyway, in a way, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Whereas I love the idea of it just being passing people, or people who won't necessarily expect to be on this list.
Yeah.
I like the sound of that.
And I think those people, I think we all have people in our lives who are kind of hugely influential, but something about the fact that they were just being them and they had no intention of being influential, I think is kind of interesting. And
that's a really good way of putting it.
And I can say this as a kind of stepmom as well. To some degree, when you're parenting, if I think about my parents and even your close family, you kind of have a duty to be influential in a way.
It's the job.
To at least be thinking about the role model that you're kind of creating or being. So I kind of thought, actually, those people who do it and then the effect it has on you, I think there's sort of something interesting in that.
Yeah, and I love the idea of it being sort of, I know what you mean. It's like, today I'm going to be your mentor, and here's me mentoring, and you are absolutely, we both know that's what's going on here, and so I'll talk, you listen, blah, blah, blah. I get that. But when you say it's just somebody being themselves, but they have an impact on you, I'm excited to hear about that. Yeah. Okay, good. All right.
And one thing you should know is also, if I were talking about my family, I'd almost certainly cry when I was talking about, because I just get, especially these days, I get quite emotional talking about things. I thought it'd be far easier to talk about these other people, but let's see, because that might not be true.
Yeah, well, I'll try and squeeze a cry out of this as well.
It won't be that hard, trust me.
All right, challenge accepted. All right, well, listen, let's get into number 1 then. Who's number 1?
So number 1 is someone whose surname I don't even know. But if any of my friends listen to this, it will make them chuckle. It's a person who we all knew as Toby Hat.
Toby Hat?
And Toby Hat was called Toby Hat because we used to see him every Friday at the club we went to, nightclub we went to, and he'd be on a podium dancing, and he'd always wear some sort of noticeable hat. Like a kind of rave days Jamiroquai kind of guy.
Okay, gotcha.
But less cool and without necessarily the same moves. But Toby Hat I'm using to kind of represent, and he just came to mind when I was thinking about a really influential period of my life. Toby Hat I'm using to represent kind of everybody who I met during my sort of early clubbing days, and the kind of, and specifically that being kind of early house music, dance music, when clubbing was a real scene. And there's lots of things I could say about that. There's some very specific things that I kind of wanted to say about the people I met in that period and the kind of impact it had on me. So Toby Hat is number one, and I can tell you more about those people that he represents. I told you.
Oh, absolutely. I really want to know. I mean, I'm from that. I think we're roughly the same age, aren't we? I spent most of my youth in because I was in a band, so I was always going to live music venues.
Right.
So I spent most of my youth there, or maybe in festivals and stuff like that. But I love dancing, Jess. Honestly, I love like clubs and dance music and just letting yourself go and just dancing till, I don't know, you can't do it anymore. And, every now and then, if there's a wedding or any excuse, I mean, it's embarrassing probably for everybody, but I don't care. I just love to dance. So I do want to know more about this. So was it a big group of you that used to go? Was it?
I mean, this is kind of part of it, really. It started off being actually some friends that I'd met at college who are still incredibly dear friends now. But it ended up being a big group of people who are people who have always been my closest friends since that time, because we sort of, our group of friends kind of randomly collected another group of friends, and then we all kind of collected each other, and they've become people who are, some of the most important people in my life. You see, I could cry now. This is probably the hardest to talk about. But I think there was a few things around that time. I think, and I'm sure there's a thing where everyone at every age thinks that the bit they went through was like the best bit.
Yeah, the best era.
I definitely feel like there was a real sense of sort of togetherness and camaraderie at that time. And I think for me, the reason that it was so influential is, I mean, loads of reasons. One, that it felt very much like a kind of group of people who were part of a tribe, and actually I'd never really felt like that before. I was into football, but just that sense of sort of we're doing something together, and it's got an importance other than just we're going dancing. It felt like it was part of a sort of cultural thing. But I think it's also, up until a certain time in your life, a lot of the people that you end up being friends with, they're kind of, and this is nothing against, I've got, still got friends from school and all those other things, but they're sort of, they're friends who are kind of, you've ended up becoming friends with because they're part of the institutions around you, whether that be your neighbourhood or whether that be the school you went to, or whether that be the fact your parents were friends. And actually, I think there was kind of, I don't know, like this idea of suddenly meeting people who were connected by something cultural, rather than being imposed or logical like all the other people I'd met. It was a different community and but it had an incredibly strong, rich sense of community. And it was very, very open. People wanted to meet each other. People wanted to find out each other. And people kind of were, I mean, I throw this word around quite a lot, actually. I think people just wanted to love each other. Yeah, they really did. They wanted to make friendships. They wanted to smile with people. And I really kind of, I think it made me a very open person emotionally. See, I could go again.
There you go.
But that's kind of why I wanted to talk about Toby Hat, because that kind of period was, I think, quite formative for me in how I am and how I treat people and how I approach friendships, which is probably all too like excited puppy.
Oh, I can relate completely. Yeah. I'm still that now, and I know you are too. Well, Toby Hat, he's sort of like your emblem, isn't he? He's your sort of poster boy for that period of your life. He was
always there. He was always there. He was always on the podium. We'd get there, we'd be like, Toby Hat's here. It's all like, we know what's going on. We're all good.
And I hope when you share this podcast with that group, they're all, like you say, they're chuckling. But I do also want to say a couple of points about that. I mean, I do know what you mean. When you are your school friends or any kind of institutional wraparound, like early work friends, for example, I'm still friends with a lot of people from work and from school. and you're kind of thrust together and you spend a lot of time together. So there is a sort of a natural kind of framework for it. So my sort of equivalent would be my music, the music scene.
Yeah.
It's very similar. You kind of follow the same bands, you get into the same thing. You like, it's a like-minded thing, and it's a chosen thing rather than a I don't know, not enforce. That's too strong a word, but you know what I mean. It's like you've gone out and found your tribe, and I love that. And the friendships you make in your 20s, I don't know about you, but they seem to be the ones that endure.
Yeah, completely.
Completely. And I said in an earlier podcast that it adds such a richness to your life if you have people who've known you for a long, long time, because you don't have to fill any gaps. They just get you immediately and you can pick up where you left off. So sounds like you've got a great gang of those. You have cheated, by the way, because you took Toby Hat, who you don't know, and then you've probably put in about 20 people there, haven't you?
Yeah, well, this was the problem. I started thinking that a million stories and moments about all those people in our, in the last 20 odd years that I've known them, but then I'll miss someone out. And actually, I think it was kind of both the individuals and then the kind of, like you say, the sort of the wrapper, the culture around what made those individuals come together, how they felt, the influence on each other, and that shared sense of sort of something happening. I think,
and something happening important
on all of them was just an openness and a kind of a candor, and a kind of sort of elevated some of those friendships very quickly. And they're the people now, and I'm sure you have this in spades of you don't have to see each other all the time.
No,
but
just pick up.
10 seconds and it's all exactly the same. And I think they're incredibly valuable friendships. But
also, I just want to say something about the era. Excuse me, that era. I mean, you're right. Most people will say this era was their youth. The era of their youth is always the best, right? So everyone loves. I'm an 80s girl, so you'll never ever stop me thinking that Duran Duran and Spandau and all that were the best bands in history, which of course they perhaps were not, but to me they were. And I think when if you're into house music and you were into that club scene, you probably felt you were on the cusp of something really important, a big change in music and a cultural shift, and that would have been really exciting for you all as well. So I'm kind of jealous. No, I'm not. I was playing in bands. I was doing my own cool jazz.
I was going to say, I was all right. That's also very cool and has a similar sense of why you feel connected to people, and then the influence that those people have on you because of that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, there you go. I love the sound of that. Well, which huge group of people are you going to choose for number 2, please, Jess?
Well, now I should have warned about, I don't know, a good couple of hundred people into one. I'm going to pick on an individual, another Jess, who I know just because of how she is will be like, I'm sure delighted, but also embarrassed at me picking her. But it's a person called Jess Hargreaves, who, when I first met her, was Jess Ponchek. And she was my first boss in London, basically. We've now been friends for 25 years, which is quite scary to say because I don't feel old enough for that to be true, but it is. And the reason I wanted to talk about Jess was, I think, do you know what? It's sort of slightly unfair because I'm going to say something about her. And actually, the people I worked for during my university career had a lot of the same qualities. But I think Jess was maybe a little bit more like a peer because we were similar in age. The people I'd worked for before at university were a little bit older. And I think as somebody who really felt like a peer but was also fundamentally my boss, I think that made her kind of even more influential. And obviously we clicked because we wouldn't be friends now if we didn't. So, and the reason I wanted to pick her is I think that, and talk about her, is there was a kind of an integrity in how she worked and a passion and an honesty that has always stuck with me. And that's kind of, I think when you're quite, I'd been working for a little while, but I was kind of fresh out of university and gone and worked in this wildly fashionable agency, which I kind of probably felt a little bit like, did I belong in? And had been kind of a bit plucked out and dropped into it. And I was probably quite intimidated. I imagine probably I was very intimidated. Although I think at that age you're a little bit like kind of, unbeatable. But Jess was just such a kind of a welcoming and stable person to come and work with. And she's still a brilliant leader now, and was a brilliant leader then. And I'm not quite sure she knew quite how brilliant she was then, although I got the sense that other people around her very much saw it. But somebody who was kind of incredible at their job, but also just really like warm and down to earth and fun, and you wanted to spend time with as well. And, that teamed with, you kind of, I think when you're at the start of your career, you assume that everyone who is successful and smart and savvy and kind of driven, you don't necessarily expect them to be quite as warm and open. It's just quite eye-opening for me. I think I was like, oh, okay, I could be like this person. Oh yeah, that's kind of, that feels good. And I never forget once she, this is the thing that really stuck with me and has always stuck with me. And I've tried to do things like this since. I remember her having a heated dispute about the company I work for paying me a bonus. And she said, I'm not taking my bonus unless you give her one. And it was a small thing. And actually, it was somebody on the receiving end of that conversation who told me she'd done it. And I thought it was just such a mark of kind of going, okay, well, I really believe in this. Yeah. And I'm going to stand up for what I believe in and show that I'm serious about what I believe in. And it's kind of something and nothing really. But I think it was just a real kind of, it was a good framework for me to think, actually, that's how I want to be.
Yeah. Well, that's huge. That's not a small thing at all. That gesture is huge. Yeah. It says, yeah, okay, fine. You're recognizing me, but if you're not recognizing, you as Jess, no, and I'm not playing. And a team. Yeah. I love it. I love that. It's absolutely my whole philosophy of leadership too. And we do fall in love with those types of leaders in the best of ways, because they give such a guide and send you on your way to kind of hold those values in the way you are. And I can say the same thing about my early sort of leadership experience with people who looked after me, who again is still in my life. And you, especially when you're young, it's really important that you have great leaders around you, because you absorb all this. Yeah, it becomes much more than just a leadership style. It becomes who you are. So completely. I think that. Yeah, I think we're both lucky in that way. I think, I'm desperate to get my first boss on here. Her name's Jan, and she's resisting so far. And I hope you're listening, Jan, because I'm coming for you. Do it, basically, come on, Jan. But, my first boss, her name's Jan Lawford. She's definitely on the hook now. And, still very much a role model for me. Still somebody I want to impress a bit. Yeah. And do you get me? Yeah, and I carry. She's on my shoulder all the time. And I worked with her, 30 odd years ago? And she's still very much in my life. We don't see each other that often, but I think about her often. And she's certainly, I have adopted many of the ways that she is. So, it's a huge thing. And that gesture that she did, I love that. I've not heard that happen before. It's never happened to me. Or maybe it did. I just didn't know. But I think that's really special. So I'm glad she's on the list. Good, Jess Hargreaves.
She would never have said it, and she would never have taken credit for it. It was somebody else that told me.
You found out.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of and it's worth saying actually. At that time in my life, I worked with loads of people who were also kind of similar. But I think Jess is a real shining example of that type of leadership. And like you say, it still is now. Whenever I see her post something on LinkedIn or be interviewed on something, I always pay attention because I know it'll be worth listening to.
Wonderful. Okay, well, I'm going to check her out. Jess Hargreaves. Excellent. Well done. And very lucky for you that you've had somebody like that in your life. I think that's excellent. All right, number 3. Who's number 3?
So number 3 is somebody who I've never met at all, but someone who's changed my life and I've probably listened to, for thousands, hundreds, if not thousands of hours. In fact, I could probably do the calculation if I needed to. So number 3 is Andy Puddicombe, who is the person who started Headspace.
Oh, wow. Okay. So
I've never met him. I've once been in the same room as him at a talk at South by Southwest, where he did a kind of mass meditation in this hall, which wasn't, to be honest, the most memorable thing. But I was thinking, well, if I think about the big influences in my life, it's probably somebody who's far away who doesn't know I exist has probably been more influential than many other people. And that's partly because meditation itself has sort of changed my life. So there's probably 2 people really I should mention is probably Nikki, the yoga teacher, who again won't remember me from anyone else. I was someone who went to her class, and I was really enjoying doing yoga, and I was quite new to it and quite kind of novice, and I kind of obviously knew what meditation was, but I'd never really done any. And I kind of got to the end and went, yeah, I love all this, but I really like this bit she does at the end. I kind of
the meditation bit.
All the physical stuff. It was, albeit, and I'm kind of, I guess, far more into this, and I'd say this, trying not to have too much of a wry smile, but all meditation, all yoga is a moving meditation, and I genuinely believe that. But it took me years to work that out. But I really liked the bit at the end, and I was like, this meditation stuff, I kind of like this.
Yeah.
And now 11 years in, I did check back on Headspace. I joined Headspace in 2014 thinking, this will be a way of me maybe getting a bit of help doing more meditation. And 11 years in and tens of thousands of minutes later, I've probably listened to Andy Puddicombe more than I have my mum and dad in terms of actually listening.
Influence. Yeah.
Board and taking the advice. So yeah, I think Andy, and even my dogs actually, when they hear Andy Puddicombe's voice, because they're so used to it, even they go into a very kind of
Zen space.
So he's probably as all the members of my family in some way, shape or form. But yeah, and so I picked him because meditation has been such an enormous influence in my life in the last decade. But yeah, just over a decade.
Well, I'm very impressed by that. I tell you why. I have the Headspace app, and I've never used it for anything else than rainy day antiques to help me go to sleep. There's a one particular recording. It's called Rainy Day Antiques. You should check it out. And it's just a guy with a really lovely voice reading a story about a man that comes along to this rainy day antique shop on a rainy day. I can't remember the name of the antique shop. But anyway, he goes in and he describes it in great detail. And I always know I've had a bad night's sleep if I get all the way to the leather hippo that's at the back of the shop.
I love that.
Because I know if I'm still awake then, I'm a good 15 minutes in. Yeah. But normally I'm gone within about 2 or 3 minutes and I never get through the front door. But it's for me anyway, it was a very sort of calming thing. But meditation, I listen to a guy called Sam Harris quite a lot. Mm-hmm. And he's got a meditation thing called Waking Up. Mm-hmm. And I know it's beneficial. He talks about it all the time. People who are good at it really rave about it. And I know it's on my path somewhere. And to tell you the bit I'm envious of is when people talk about thoughts passing like traffic. And they are just thoughts. They're not actually real. You just think them and then they pass you by. I'm like, oh my goodness, that sounds brilliant. How do you do that? But I know it's practice. I know you've got to commit to it. And I know you've got to make, you do have to make time and kind of prioritize it a bit. But everybody I know who does it just raves about it. So I'll add you to my list of that too.
Yes, it's you have to see it as a kind of like any other fitness or health goal that you have, that something you want to get good at. You do have to put the time in, and that sometimes I think for some people feels a little bit counterintuitive. I know a lot of people, especially busy entrepreneurs, will say my head's too busy, and I would never want to kind of correct them directly in that, but it is a discipline. Yeah, it is a discipline, and it is but it is a completely life-changing discipline, which is worth it. And I have the same thing as you have with cold water swimming, in that I can't move for people telling me that cold water swimming will change my life. I live by the sea. I could go cold water swimming every day, but I can't get past the fact that the first bit, when I get in, when I'm not used to it,
it's going to hurt.
And every time I do it, I go, that's great. I'm slightly traumatized by the beginning bit, and then I never get to the point where it's really good. And I think it's the same thing, actually. Once you get over the barrier of, I've made the time, I've done it, I actually now am starting to enjoy it. And I am starting to be able to understand that all these emotions are things I can observe and not get carried away with. Then you will find it's worth it. It's the cold water swimming of mental health.
The mind.
Yeah, there you go. What I will say, as a short point, that if anybody is thinking of listening to sleepcasts, I will now listen to, I'm very fortunate, actually. I sleep very well. But if I ever listen to a sleepcast, I always listen to Cat Marina. So I'd urge you to give Cat Marina a go. Maybe this is because I have a boat in London and live on a boat some of the time. So maybe I'm just predisposed to wanting to listen to Cat Marina. But I will now try Rainy Day Antiques.
When you say Cat Marina, are we talking C-A-T or K-A-T?
Yes, cats.
C-A-T. All right, everybody.
It's about a marina full of cats.
It describes
cats, it describes the boats. For anyone listening, do give Cat Marina a go.
All right. Underlined, underscored on my page here. I'm going to do that.
Absolutely.
Oh, wonderful. Well,
so actually, my 3.
Yeah, well, I'm just going to do a little anecdote around that again, which is that, okay, what is my equivalent? I do swim, so I don't do cold water swimming. I don't like the outdoors in that way. I tried swimming once in the sea, and all I could think about was what was underneath. And I just panicked, and I'm a good swimmer, but I just could not relax. And also, I only do front crawl. So, it's not particularly nice putting your head into cold water. It makes you get a headache. And so I swim in a lovely, lovely outdoor clean pool with no fishes in it. But so my version of meditation is the laps. I just switch off completely and think purely about the stroke and the feeling of the water and the turning and the environment I'm in. And that's my version of it. But firstly, can't do that every day. Secondly, not sure it's really meditation. I think it's just a version of it. So I am going to give this a go. And I think Headspace is a really wonderful app. So I will give that another look. So thank you for that.
You know what, do I always say if I'm ever, and I talk to a lot of the founders that I work with as well about meditation. I'm not a kind of
my dog.
Most of the time in my life there's a dog barking, so I'm so glad it's not me.
Can you still hear her? She's so terrible. She's tiny, but she makes such a lot of noise. Anyway, we're sorry about that, Jess. Please continue.
No, I always think if I could even just get 1 or 2 people to give meditation a proper go, I know it will be so enriching for them.
Yeah.
Right. I always think it's a really nice thing to pass on.
Okay, well, we've done that, everybody. Okay, number 4. Who's number 4?
Number 4 is a woman called Nadia Pal. And I remember slightly inelegantly telling her about this once, but I was probably a bit embarrassed and then didn't really sort of tell her, or maybe did tell her how she influenced me, but maybe kind of, I don't know, probably quite a few years ago. And I wonder how good a job I did of saying it, really. Partly she's not someone I know brilliantly well. We're kind of, in similar circles and peer groups. But she would not be 100% surprised, because I definitely have said this to her at some point before. But I think, and actually I realise, maybe only reflecting on it now, there are definitely some similar threads in why I picked Jess, but they are slightly sort of different. So Nadia I credit as being the kind of first person I met in business who really inspired me to be me and not kind of put on too much of a show and an act and not worry about everything being prim and perfect, and you know, and I don't think I've ever. I'm quite confident. I'm relatively extrovert. I consider those things to be quite fortunate, and things that have stood me in relatively good stead. But I definitely think until I met her, I had more. Maybe I didn't realize it, but I definitely had more of a kind of I've got to kind of portray a certain type of character, and I've got to be this, like this, and together like this, and people expect it to be X, and it's not that it's not about kind of being professional. It was just almost about having that kind of a bit of a mask on, actually. And I'd not met her. I can't remember who introduced us, but I went to see her, and at the time she was the managing director of a kind of very successful sort of fashionable creative agency in London. And I remember I was probably quite kind of, okay, this is somebody I'd like to make a good impression in front of. And I was probably realistically a bit intimidated at going to meet her, whatever. But I remember meeting her, and we had a good meeting, probably nothing massively memorable about meeting, but I remember thinking, oh, she's a really nice person. I'm really happy spending time with her. That was delightful. But it was really then when our paths were crossing, and it might have been actually when we both started to work for, do some work with BEMA, the British Interactive Media Association, a sort of industry body, that we probably crossed paths more. And it was the first time I saw her speak that really struck me as somebody who was just really unashamed about being like just was just really themselves. Like didn't feel like everything had to be totally polished, didn't feel like everything had to be really rehearsed, and really swore a bit, and you know, and everything wasn't. And I just thought, and actually, and of course, because she's smart, she knew her stuff, she cared about it. She's a really likable person. Everyone listened and was really engaged. And I thought, oh, okay, that's like a much nicer way of, because I'd started to be kind of pushed into doing a bit more sort of public speaking, and it sort of, in a way, it like terrified me, because I got to be, you know, I've got to rehearse everything, and I've got to kind of, my own lack of confidence really, and lack of kind of ability to be vulnerable in those moments. So instead I get myself really het up about this stuff and try and have it all perfect. And it was just so nice watching somebody just be so natural but doing the same thing. And I thought, oh, I'd be more like that. That's more me. And it was just a real breath of fresh air. And it really sort of set me off on a path of just trying to be. And I think it's definitely been happening. It's a kind of a thing that's gradually becoming more important to me, but without me necessarily giving it loads of thought. I'm really, really intentional now about trying to be more myself. Work, you know, at work, in a professional environment, but all the time, you know, just all the time, and not kind of feeling embarrassed about that.
I love that, because actually when people are wholeheartedly themselves, you know, people relax around you. You just know they do, because everyone knows what they're getting. I think all this masking, all it does is create mistrust. It creates discomfort, you know, and people not feeling, I don't know, safe with you. If you're absolutely your truest self, then I personally, I aspire to that too. I don't really have other sides. This is it. This is the person I am. And I've spoken before about, you know, this idea of not leaving yourself at the door and occupying yourself on the way out, because I just think it must be exhausting. And I've talked about this before, but it must be absolutely exhausting to be second guessing all the time. But also it doesn't serve anybody, because the person opposite you isn't getting a good experience from you either. And I honestly believe that in this digital world where everyone's talking about artificial everything, the bit that we're going to be so tuned into is realness. I think realness is going to be the next big currency for all of us. It's what we're going to be seeking for our entertainment, for our connection, for our what we spend our money on, everything. So I think if anybody's listening who's got investment ideas and money in their pocket, anything that's human and real, I think that's going to be the next wave. Because that mistrust is already there in spades. We don't trust the content. We don't trust the message. We don't trust the news. So many things we're kind of being made to not trust. So when you meet someone like Nadia, who says, here I am, here's my full self, here's the roughest side of me, the best side of me, all at once, and can back it up. That's really attractive. Those the kind of people personally I'm very attracted to. So I'm really glad she's made it on the list, not just for her, but for the message of it, which is that's when we're all at our best. When we drop all the masks, we drop all the nonsense, and we just show up and go, hey, I'm Jess. What's going on? It's nice to meet that kind of energy. And you have that energy. When I first met you, very much like that. So I think Nadia's obviously had a big impact on who you are. So, but we'll come on to that later, Jess. All right. Well, I like the sound of her very much. Let's talk about number 5.
Number 5 is someone whose name I don't know. So this is the artist who will be known as the Uber driver who said a thing to me that I never forgot. And this really did come from your a little prompt when we first met, and you said, well, you could talk about somebody who said something to you in passing. And it kind of stuck with me, because it's one of those things where sometimes you pick up a little phrase from somebody and it ends up meaning kind of a lot. And then I got in an Uber, and I can't remember what had happened. This could be a better story. A better storyteller would have some detailed narrative about it. But I'm just going to tell you the truth and tell you that I can't remember exactly what had happened. But I think I was kind of telling him about some sort of relatively stressful situation, which is like stressful in the moment. It wasn't something completely, it wasn't something completely ridiculous. It was something relatively chunky, but it was something that kind of was stressful because it kind of was a bit of a near miss, or stressful that it was a relatively small thing, but it could have been far worse. And he just said to me, he said, well, small things happen, so big things don't have to. And it always stuck with me that, I've said it to people 1,000 times, and actually there'll be people rolling their eyes going, oh my God, I've heard her give this one out.
She nicked that from an Uber driver.
Yeah. But I think there's kind of it was influential because the number of times I've thought about something, or the number of times any of us could think about something that is unfortunate, stressful, I'll often use the expression of something that's very frustrating and say, well, that's life tax for you, and we can get quite wound up about those things, and we can get frustrated or sad or angry. And of course, sometimes they are incredibly frustrating and they are incredibly sad. But in the grand scheme of things, they're probably not. Yeah. And this idea that there's lots of small things happen, and actually they're the little things that prevent some of the really big, bad things happening is just a really nice concept. And of course, it doesn't all work that way, and those things don't happen in place of other things. But there's just something nice to hold on to go, well, you know what, this terrible thing happened today, but that small thing happened, so some big thing didn't have to. And it's so important to, consider where we are, consider what we've got. I mean, in other cliche, roll your eyes, kind of morning routine stuff like meditation and yoga, which I also do. I also do write a gratitude journal, and I've been doing that for about 11 years as well, I think. And I think that kind of appreciation of all of the things that are going well, and putting those small things kind of in their place is really important. And I think that Uber driver saying that one thing, which just gave me a little thing to think about, or an expression to say to somebody, was kind of influential as a little grounding reminder of, whatever's happened, there's probably a million things today that have gone right for us to be sat here doing this podcast, and for the sun to be shining, and, to have our health and all those other things.
Well, there's so much in everything you just said. So can I unpick a few bits?
Yeah,
because firstly, I just love the wisdom of taxi drivers, Uber drivers. I'm the same as you. I'll always strike a conversation with them.
Oh, always.
Because they're the kind of people that are in the background of our lives, but at the same time, they're such enablers. They get you to where you need to be, and they just do it quietly, unassumingly. But when you do strike up a conversation with them, they're some of the worldly wisest people because
Completely.
they see all things and they have all types of people.
Yeah.
And London cabbies in particular, they're famous for it, aren't they? But
Oh,
I love that.
I am the passenger, by the way, who I've literally been sat having an a conversation with an Uber driver. And especially Uber, because it tends to be in a black cab, you're really busy going somewhere. And having lived kind of out of central London a bit more, I've used kind of, and I've literally been the customers, we're still sat there 10 minutes after talking. And the driver's like called in his next job and we're still chatting. And then I'm like, right, I probably better go.
Yeah. But anyway, but there's something about the I don't know, the transient nature of it. You're never seeing that person again. So there's something special about that. I don't know if you ever stop to think about it, but it's a moment in which will go. But like you say, he's had such an impact on how you think. And let's unpick that a bit more, which is, if you do have a near miss with something, like you say, you could say you've broken your arm today and you're like, oh my God, I've broken my arm. But the decision you're making, this happened to my brother actually. I actually just thought of this. He broke his arm 2 weeks ago. My brother is 60 and he's as fit as any 25-year-old. And he throws himself around the football pitch like as if he's 25. And he's a goalkeeper. So you imagine that's a very physical role. And you can't be half a goalkeeper because you have to do the whole goal, right? So if someone's smashing it into the top left, he is making that save. He's as fit as he ever was. But of course, as you get older, you're maybe not as, I don't know, he'll argue with me on this, but maybe you're not quite so good at healing, for example. Even if you've got the fitness, you might not heal as well. So anyway, he broke his arm 2 weeks ago, and because someone stomped on it, frankly. Oof. And he's got a plate in it now and all this kind of stuff. And that accident, whatever you want to call it, has made him decide not to play football anymore. And he was very sad about it. But I said, Daryl, it might be because that incident is saving you from a bigger incident. That there could be something that happens on that pitch that isn't just a pin and a plaster cast. And you do need to start thinking about that you are 60 and everybody else is 25 on the pitch. So he's an amazing goalkeeper, but and I never thought he'd say it, but he said, yeah, I know, I'm not going to play football anymore. I think I'm going to hang up my gloves now. So it's the same thing. It's like that smaller thing, maybe saving him from a bigger thing. And the gratitude thing, well, I don't write a gratitude journal, but when I'm having one of my sulks or one of my little moods, which I can do, you can ask my partner, I am much better now at zooming out and going, what am I worrying about? What am I complaining about? Look at all the great things I've got going on in my life. So I believe in that. I believe in taking stock of the good stuff. So firstly, here's to all the Uber drivers and taxi drivers out there for all their pearls of wisdom and their unique perspectives. And
15-minute friends.
15-minute friends. I love that. There's probably a program in that,
Yeah,
there's probably some sort of TV format.
Yes.
You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah,
I love that.
Completely. And I love the thing you said about that kind of, just the, when so much of life passes you by, arguably kind of in your own environment, which must be quite odd because it's your space, it's your vehicle, and all these people pass through it and they've got all these different ideas. And if you can't pick up pearls of wisdom, having had, 50 speed dates with humanity every day.
That's a great way of putting it.
I don't know who can.
Yeah, I love that. There's another format. There you go. You come up with 2 TV formats in 30 seconds, Jess.
There we go.
This is you're going back into your creative days. Anyway, good. Well, listen, that's the 5. And we touched on something earlier, and I sort of hinted that we're going to pick up on this theme. But the theme really is about how these people have all influenced you directly. And, obviously there are some things we've already you've recognized in yourself. And, if I was to summarize, it's that the connectedness you had in your early tribe, the music tribe, the leadership values and principles and behaviors that you've learned from your 2 colleagues there, Nadia and oh, hang on. I've lost it. Jess, Nadia and Jess. These are very important influences, and they're so self-evident that they are embodied in who you are now, as well as all the things like meditation and these pearls of wisdom. But do you ever, as part of this process, did you sit there and think, well, what specifically can I recognize in me from those people?
Yeah, and I think it is a few of the things that I've talked about. I think I do have the kind of, I think sometimes it's quite, I think even actually the kind of the things like meditation, I see in myself very directly, even though maybe some of those other people feel like they're more directly influential, in that kind of my working style, my personal style. I try to be a kind of, to take stock and move at a very intentional pace, especially in my professional kind of engagements, and with extra brain, of sort of not rushing at things and taking perspective. And then I think, to be honest, certainly with Nadia and Jess, there are things I directly see, and they are about being me and just being really comfortable with that, and kind of and hopefully inspiring some other people to feel like they can be that as well, but without kind of forcing it down people's throats in a way that neither of those two people did. In fact, they weren't really aware that they were having that influence at the time, which I think is what's kind of, there's something interesting in that idea that people are just being them and they're still kind of massively influential. So I suppose I try and be me, and maybe anyone who knows me, listens to this podcast, can say otherwise, or say if that's true or not, but that's not really for me to judge, only that I feel like I'm being me. And to try and have integrity and stand by my values. And I certainly have the kind of, maybe I don't think of it so explicitly this way, but I certainly had for a long time very explicitly like the what would Jess do voice in my head after working with Jess. And other people who had some of those similar traits after. And then, and I suppose that kind of, I talked a little bit about this at the beginning, the stuff I talked about, Toby hat as my symbol for all those other people. I think certainly that openness and that willingness to be, to connect and to kind of, and I definitely still connect with people around sort of cultural things. I still connect around music all the time. That's part of part of my life and part of the radio show and some of those. So I suppose some of that is kind of really obvious in that I definitely took from it that love and desire for kind of connecting with people around mutual passions. And it's something I think I sort of seek out without really thinking about it. And I still, I mean, when you talked about going, I mean, this is a slightly less serious direct influence. But when you talked about dancing, like I literally, if I don't go dancing somewhere on a quarterly basis, I go slightly kind of, that's something that's still for me one of the most kind of liberating collective experiences.
All right. Well, next time you do one of your get-togethers, can you tack on some dancing afterwards, you just make it optional for everybody to join you? Because I will definitely sign up for that.
Dancing, that'll be fine.
We'll just go dancing. I'm just trying to come up with a format.
Absolutely.
We'll just do it anyway. Oh, I do really like that. I mean, can we just go back to your radio show then? Because I don't know about that, do I? I think you mentioned something earlier, but not on this podcast, but when we chatted before. But tell me about the radio show. Tell us more about that.
I mean, this is probably a good. Maybe this is a good way, actually, of kind of, I think, sort of demonstrating a little bit of some of the things I talked about being open and about importance of connecting around cultural kind of moments. So I do a radio show with a person called Pete Miller. Hi, Pete. Who is a person who I met purely through a music community run by somebody called Jed Hallam, who I'm going to come on to shortly. And we worked out, but it was a WhatsApp community. It was a huge community. You could miss it for a few hours and there'd be hundreds of messages. I found it quite overwhelming. But I'd certainly go into it, lots of people recommending albums they'd listened to, music they'd listened to, interesting things they'd read. that now exists. It's called Love Will Save the Day. That now exists as quite a big Discord community, but also a radio station called Love Will Save the Day FM. And I had I'd done, without going into detail, I'd done something a bit radio-ish before. And Jed, the person I mentioned earlier, said, we're going to start a radio station. I think you should pitch a show. And Pete is someone who we'd noticed that we liked very similar types of music. Our show is called the Liminal Show, and because I have to give it a plug, I'd probably get a kick under the table from Pete if I don't. But we play kind of modern classical, ambient, electronic, bit jazz, bit folk, bit of soul. It's very kind of, we both have an incredibly similar taste in kind of very rhythmic, quite textural music. And it goes into kind of dance music and all sorts of genres. And every show is quite different. But we'd noticed we like the same types of music, to the extent that whenever one of us posted something in this group, we'd tag the other one in, because we kind of knew that we liked the same music. And then I had a problem with an amp that I used to use to run my record player. And it turns out that's Pete's area of expertise. So we had a brief phone conversation where he helped me fix my amp. And then when this show came up, I said to Jed, do you know Pete? He said, actually, as it happens, I do. He lives very near me. I said, I think I should do a radio show with him. Do you think he'd be up for it? And he said, I think that's a good idea. You should ask him. So the first time we ever met was the first radio show we did together.
Wow.
So our show has been part social experiment of a friendship forming, and part, musical entertainment for people.
Well, there's a thread there. There's two men in your life who just said yes straight away and threw themselves in. So that's Pete and Jindy. Didn't you say liminal, as in subliminal, but without the sub bit? Is that what you said?
Yeah, liminal kind of means a sort of a space in between, a sort of transitory space. And music we play, we tend to start very slowly, and kind of we're kind of the liminal space between your working week and the weekend, because we go out first thing on a Saturday morning.
I love that. Okay, so the Liminal Show
on Love Will Save the Day FM.
Love Will Save the Day FM. Brilliant. All right. Well, Pete will be happy, won't he?
Yes.
Good. All right. Well, listen. The sort of next question I'd like to ask is, you've had all this investment. You have had some amazing people and continue to meet new people, and I'm sure it's just a big feature of who you are and how you live your life. But there's something I want to encourage with this podcast, which is like an intentional taking forward of all that great investment, and you kind of, I suppose it's a pay forward, isn't it? It's saying, I've had all of this. How do I take this forward into the world? What am I going to do with it that's going to kind of, proliferate or influence or do some good with it? So have you had time to think about that? When you were in your camper van by the sea, which I hate you for, did you have time to think about that particular part of the podcast today?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like to think, maybe this feels quite arrogant to say, but I'd like to think I try and do that a bit every day.
Yeah, the embodiment of it.
Of being kind of, hopefully, actually somebody who, one of the Brains from Extra Brains, who's also recently joined our board, did a very... did an International Women's Day post, and I was one of the people he called out. And one of the things that I appreciated most, of course, it's always very nice when somebody kind of talks about them appreciating the influence you've had on their lives. And the way he finished his sentence was, and she's really shown me how to be more myself, more human in a professional environment. And that was probably the biggest compliment I think I could get, really. So I think... Yeah. I think actively trying to do that and helping people understand that they don't need to be, always kind of, I don't know, trying to be the person who they kind of perhaps think they should be in a professional environment or a personal environment, to be honest. So I think there's a bit of kind of actively going out of my way to help people do that and be that and feel good about that. Yeah. Even though sometimes that may not necessarily always have, the very best outcome, because some people are looking for that facade, some people are looking for that, But I think the best thing you can do is to help people be more of them.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, there's the things that you do, which are kind of platforms for all of that. So that's the extra brain bit and your radio show. But then there's the person you are that just, just by being is going to have an influence on the people around you. And yeah, in the short time we've known each other, I'd absolutely say that's a tick VG, as my teacher rarely said to me. So no, I think that's an objective well met. Okay, good. I like the sound of that.
Somebody from this podcast go and take up headspace. There we go. That's a thing I'd really like to.
Yeah, if one person does.
Yeah, if one person does, I'll be really happy, because it will be a good life-changing experience for them.
Well, I'll tell you what, we've got a few things of feedback we need now from this podcast. Firstly, does anybody out there have any stories from the days of Toby Hat? I'd love to hear about that. And also, is anybody out there actually going to try Headspace, and let us know how they've gotten on with it. But all right, so my final part then, you think you've already alluded to it then. My last piece is, who should I speak to next and why?
So I have picked a person called Jed Hallam. So I've known, well, the reason that I got involved in that music community, the big WhatsApp group, which is has ended up becoming the station. Jed used to write a newsletter called Love Will Save the Day, which always had a kind of a playlist, a music playlist that went with it. And that's kind of where it started. So I feel like I've kind of known him for a longer time. But actually, I've known him in person for a much shorter time, partly from the start of the station. And then I did some work as a volunteering on the strategy board for the station. So I've worked more with him probably in the last year than ever before. And Jed he's a fellow Gemini, and we're both kind of, I struggle with this a little bit, because the very pragmatic, quite scientific part of me wants to kind of not think that that's a thing. Equally, the person who knows I am absolutely massively drawn to other Geminis.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I'm a Gemini. Just saying. There you go. Proving a point.
Honestly, I mean, as soon as I ask someone when their birthday is, I kind of already know what they're going to say if I get on with them already. So he's a fellow Gemini, and we have joked about this, about kind of definitely being drawn to other Geminis. And I think one of the things, for those who don't believe in star signs horoscopes and any impact that has on you, for people who are born at a certain time of year who just happen to be really good at connecting with people, then I think he's really one of those. He's very sort of drawn to people. He likes kind of deeply connecting with people. He's very thoughtful. He's an absolute voracious reader of books and doer of things. Like, he reads more books than I just don't know where he has the time to read all the books. And on top of doing like running for 24 hours straight, and helping run the station, and doing a radio show, and being a father, and being a friend, and about 4 billion other things, and running a company, and about 4 billion other things he does. So I do a few of those things, but I don't do ultra marathons or books a day, or anyway, I don't actually know how he stretches time. So it might be you find he's got a time machine, which will be good for everybody.
Yes, if you can share the secret.
Yeah, fascinating person for you to interview on this, because I'd certainly love to hear more about the people who've influenced him.
Brilliant. Well, you know how this works. You actually do have to introduce us, which is marvellous.
Yes, I will do that. Yeah, it will be over to you.
Fabulous.
Over to you, Jed.
Yeah, I can't wait to meet him. I know what you mean by that Gemini thing. Is it because we're just born in June, and June's such a great month? I don't know. Yeah. It just feels like most of the Geminis I meet, they're kind of full of beans and, full of life, really. So, okay, well, that's Jed. Can't wait to meet him. Is there any sort of, I don't know, further thoughts or things you'd like to share before we wrap up? Is there anything else you haven't talked about today that you're thinking, gosh, I wish I'd mentioned that before we close?
Oh, no, I think I'll probably finish the call and then still feel guilty about all the people I haven't mentioned. And again, I think that's just about when you I think if you are a real peoply person, you recognise that there are so many things you take from so many people.
Well, should we do a little caveat?
All the people I haven't mentioned.
Yeah.
The thing I'd like to say is, I think for anyone listening to this today, I don't know, maybe just take a moment to notice all the influencers, even the person who serves you in the post office. There'll be something
I love that
you take away.
Oh, look, I'm so glad I asked you that final question. I'm going to introduce that into the format now because I haven't done that before. But I had a feeling you'd have something really brilliant to say about it. So thank you for that.
It's brilliant, but yeah.
It was, trust me.
Don't overlook all the overlook all those people who unintentionally influence you.
I love that. Well, listen, Jess, it's been an absolute pleasure. I knew it would be. Well, Geminis, aren't we? We've just discovered this. But
scary.
Yeah, no disrespect to all the other star signs, but yeah, it is all about us. I'm joking. So listen, it's been great to spend some time with you. Look forward to seeing you again. We're going dancing. End of.
Yeah.
So until the next time, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. It's been great.
Thank you so much for having me on. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. Well, that was Jess, and I really enjoyed that. I think the best thing about this is that I get to chat to really good people for a good hour and a half about what's on their mind, and I really, really enjoyed that. The only thing missing was probably a glass of wine. So yes, I hope you enjoyed it too. If you did, please like, subscribe, leave a review, share with a friend, or maybe get in touch. Maybe you would like to talk about the 5 people that matter to you. Until the next time, please take care. Bye-bye for now.